All right, welcome back to another episode of We All Speak in Poems. Today I'm talking to Chris Bartels, a producer, sound artist, singer, and songwriter who makes music as Elskavon, Blurstem, Bora York, Mumchild, Olma, Glass Echoes, and many more. In this episode, we're talking about his newest album, Origins, that came out as Elskavon a few weeks back. We're also talking about the way he makes music, when he started making music, the start of his side projects, and much more. I hope you enjoy it. So I guess starting with Elskavon, and then which is like your ambient main project. I see it as your main project, right?
Yeah, basically Elskavon is definitely the longest standing moniker project, whatever you want to call it. I think like early demos for Elskavon is probably before I came up with the name and definitely before I put anything out on the internet, but like early demos was like 2007 probably 2007 when I was like kind of enamored by I'd never heard ambient music until then, and then I think like Sigur Rós like blew my mind. A friend was like, listen to Sigur Rós, and I did, and it just like destroyed me. And then I don't remember how I got into, whether it was maybe Jonsi's, Rice Boys Sleeps album, which is still one of my favorite all-time albums, or Jonsi and Alex, or another. I don't know how I got into like ambient instrumental music, but I just did around that time. Then Elskavon. The first album for Elskavon was 2012. I think I'd probably put stuff on like. Well, that was still like MySpace era, so maybe MySpace or YouTube or Facebook. Yeah. But then first like album was Movements in Season 2012. Yeah, at that time I had looked at Elskavon. Actually, in my mind, I would have called it probably like a side project, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know, and I don't know why. I just that's probably where my mind was at the time. It's just like it's just an instrumental project of mine where I was still like, and I am still. We'll get into that. Writing vocal music and like full on pop indie stuff, and I think I always thought like Elskavon will just be kind of like a relaxing side thing because I love ambient music, I love instrumental music, modern classical, that whole thing. And then and I just like threw it on Bandcamp, and then eventually on, at the time you said iTunes and and whatnot, and then I just loved it so much that I made albums the next couple of years, and then I took a break, and it was like 3 years before I came out with the next album. But then ever since then, Skylight, that album, it like has morphed into I would say at this point definitely my main project. Yeah, now I wouldn't even call it an ambient project. It is. It just still has elements of ambient, but it's electronic. I've got vocals now. I kind of just do whatever I want now. But it's definitely become my main creative baby with projects, I would say. So
yeah, and getting into your new album Origins, like when did that sort of start? Because I feel like I hadn't really heard a new Elskavon music for a while, and then all of a sudden it was like, you were posting about it constantly, as you should, but like the sounds that you were making and you were coming out with were quite different. I don't even know how to explain them. Maybe just more electronic. You have your vocals in it and stuff. When did you decide that you actually wanted to go that route with Elskavon instead of starting another alias?
Right. Yeah. I think it just happened kind of by accident. For me, when it's an accident, it's like, then I know it's like, I love it. Like when it comes to like production or, and I talk about studio accents all the time and about the new album and in posts and things like that. I just like fully embrace that stuff now. If it feels good and it just came by accident, then I just like fully embrace it. So, I would say this new sound, actually only like a few people know this that I've told to. I actually had and have, I mean, a full album done, unreleased, that was gonna be Elskavon.
Wow.
And it was still a progression of style, but still kind of, I would say, similar to Skylight, and still a little bit more organic. No like four on the floor kicks, no like lyrical vocals, more past Elskavon for lack of better style wise. And then there was Origins that I was writing, and I actually don't remember the point where I was like, yes, Origins is an Elskavon album. I was just like writing these songs, and it's like, yeah, some of them started as like Elskavon in mind, some of them just were happening, and I don't know, I didn't know if I would put them under a different moniker or what. And then it was funny, like just talking with Brian at Western Vinyl, who I'm working with, who the label for this album. It was just funny, like sending that album, the unreleased one that's still shelved, but it's going to be put out probably under Blurstem.
Okay.
And then Origins, and we were both like, man, proud of them both. I love them both, but Origins, there's like something special there, and just like being excited about this like new thing.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, what if I just like take this entire full album and be like, no, I'm gonna shelve it actually. And that was like a huge decision, because it's like, I mean, you know how much goes into writing a full album, just like hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
And to make that decision, just be like, we're just like gonna go for it with Origins, and it's gonna be a new era really for me, with or for the Elskavon project.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun. It was kind of exciting. And that's kind of like the flavor, the energy, whatever you want to call it, behind Origins. But yeah. So as far as like a moment in time, I don't remember. I do remember there were certain times of like writing these songs. So like take the title track, for example, Origins, it's the first track. Like I was just sitting at night one time on my couch with my laptop and then Ableton Push, and just doing more rhythmic stuff that I would not have thought at that time as Elskavon song. Four on the floor kick, you know, there's some like synth bass stuff that's pretty upbeat, more electronic elements, you know, a lot of sampling stuff, and so at the time I was like, you know, this probably won't be an Elskavon song. But then there was this point where I was just like, no, it is. No, it's part of this new
for sure
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Like, you get so excited about new ideas and what you're working on that the stuff that you already have ready just becomes irrelevant. And the more I talk to artists, the more I find that, especially around this point, maybe it's because of, you know, the lockdowns that happened or whatever, and we were so excited making so much music at the time.
Yeah.
We all have like one or two albums that we're sitting on that might never see the light of day, you know? Like I'm personally sitting on like 20 tracks that, you know, just don't have a home and probably won't. And it's funny that you mentioned that too, because it's been a consistent pattern in the artists that I've been talking to lately.
Cool. Yeah.
But especially for you with sort of, it seems like there's a little bit of a focus on the live aspect of it too. Did that make it more exciting for you writing this, like knowing that you could actually perform this in an exciting way instead of just, you know, having drones and ambient music?
Yeah. Probably not a lot when I was writing, but then, or at least early stages of writing. And that's usually the case for my stuff, is I just write and just let it be. But definitely like later on, like finishing up and then having it finished, then it was definitely like, okay, this would be exciting to another level to play live, and then even bring on a couple friends and do a small band thing. You know, and I haven't done much. I've played a couple local shows, and I have a album release show that I just announced here in Minneapolis. But yeah, I mean, I've thought about like maybe doing a little bit of touring or something like that. It's just that I haven't done a ton of that in general live, and it's but I would like to, but I also weigh like how much would I like to compared to being here at home and just keep on trucking. But But yeah,
Even with the live YouTube videos, like that added so much to this album release, right? You can actually see that you can play this, and you have your Elska band as you called it on Instagram before.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool to see. Like, that's exciting for me, and I think that's going to be pretty inspirational and exciting for other artists to, take a hold of, get inspired from you doing that, and hopefully we'll start to see it more in this community of people, because I know a lot of people do take the live stuff seriously, but it's definitely not at the forefront of ambient or even this type of electronic music, the more organic, slow, chill stuff, I guess,
Yeah. I decided, I was like, I got to prioritize doing the live studio day thing, because part of me is like, it's so much work to set up live setup, for me at least, with the Ableton setup and the MIDI mapping and all, and it's fun, and it's definitely worth it when I do it. And there's something super special about like doing music with other humans, and playing music for other humans, as opposed to just being here in my room by myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that session almost didn't happen because I almost gave up on it because I was like, so much work, holidays. We filmed it like mid-December. My family we had sick kids. I was just like, and then it was a financial investment, of course. And I was just like, is this even worth? But then I was just like, you know what? I just got to do it. And I was probably just making a bigger deal out of it than I needed to, which I tend to do sometimes. But I'm so glad we went through it and did it, and just like filmed at a cool spot there in a cool room, and just kind of a unique setup. And now I always have that. And also, yeah, hopefully it is inspiring to other people, and there is a certain energy to it that's exciting in this realm. So
yeah, it's already inspiring to me. Like, for my last album, I wanted to do these sort of live playthroughs. I was going to do it all myself, and I ended up filming one video, and then gave up on it, which is fine. It happens, as I'm sure you have 1,000 ideas and only 2 of them go through. But then just watching yours, like, I'm like, man, it would be different if I had a sweet, space to do this, and maybe it'd be worth it to rent out a studio to do that, or just a cool looking house or something. It make the whole thing different, and more exciting, I think, because I was just doing it in my basement.
Yeah, but even in your basement, it's like, so I did North Soul, one of the songs I filmed in my basement, and that one was one that a lot of people messaged me and said they really liked as well. And like, in my mind, a similar thing where it's like, well, it's just in my basement. It's just like, and my wife filmed, and I did a couple takes, and then we just picked, this is my favorite take, and then that was it. And it's still a lot of work to set up, and but it was still like, didn't feel like a big deal. But yeah, I think it's probably just like that, people being able to see you play the music that you wrote, there's something special about that and worth it. But so yeah, but definitely, like, if you can find a cool space or unique space and make a thing out of it, even being a lot of work and a bit of investment at times, that is, I think it was worth it. It was super special to have that, I think. And
yeah, 100%. Was this album your first Elskavon album with your vocals in it, or did you used to spread it around a little bit as well? Because like, Blossom in the Void is like pretty heavy vocal track, like for an ambient
like
song,
a pop track,
or for an electronic. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Like, when did you want to start adding vocals to Elskavon?
So I've always had vocals with Elskavon, but it's only ever been oohs and ahs, super reverbed out. So vocals, but ambient vocals, quote unquote, sort of thing. You get it. Yeah, I've never like considered, the closest thing I got on probably Skylight album was like, I I think there were a couple kind of sporadic singing of things and improvisation usually, but then I would affect them and process them and bury them so much that it didn't seem or sound like a normal lyrical vocal. Yeah, when it came to, I think it's probably "See Out Loud," the song on the new album, that I was playing around with my tape machine, which I could even just show you, I guess, the
nice, yeah,
60s tape machine I have here, and I was just like experimenting with like, I don't do a lot of tracking directly to that, but I'll track in Logic and then send it to that, and then I'll do the half speed and double speed and reverse stuff, and then I'll send it back into Logic, and then I'll process that, and then I'll send that back onto tape. And I was just doing this, like, I was just having an afternoon of weird experimental tape fun madness, and it just like, and then I just started singing things, and it ended up being like so fun for me, and a new types of experiments where I was just like, yeah, this is really fun, and for me at least, very unique sound vocally, and it just kind of like happened from there. I think there was just like a light bulb in my head where I was just like, why should I have any boxes or walls around like what Elskavon quote should or shouldn't be? So then I just decided to just go for it, and then, but it's kind of like, it was open ended where it's like you said, Blossom in the Void. It almost feels like there's a verse type thing. Almost feels like a pop song in that regard, or at least form. But then there's other songs where it's like you get a little hook here in the middle of the song, and then just a tiny little thing later. It's just kind of all over the board, and it's just kind of a playground of, yeah, if I want vocals here, I do it. And if I want them to be really trippy sampled things, then I do that. And if I don't want vocals here, then I don't,
Yeah, for sure. And that's what this album feels like, is like, it feels like you were just messing around. You took the best parts of your sessions, and that's been super inspiring too. Like, even just the fact that you were willing to put vocals or like an almost pop song on this album, it's just like reminds you that you can do whatever you want. It's a music project. You don't have to worry about because I don't know how much you worry about algorithmic stuff and all the editorial, all this stuff of the inside of the music business, but I'm sure you do get in your head, because I do a lot.
For sure.
Like, when I'm putting out an album, I'm like, this song's not going to get on a playlist. Is it even worth it to put it out? But it seems like with this album,
or is it going to sing?
Exactly. It seems like with this album, you kind of just did exactly what you wanted to do, and that's really awesome. And you can tell, and it's really made a great project.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. But do you think about all that stuff?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we're lying to ourselves if we're not, at least to some degree at certain points, like thinking about that, and I'm also like, I wouldn't even say it's like blanket right or wrong to necessarily think about that. Like at the end of the day, it's like, I think most of us would say we're influenced by other artists, and we've always kind of said that, and that's like
true.
Going back to like when I said Sigur Rós, like that's a very common one in our world, of like that band like influencing us, and the influence comes from like this love of this music and like being a fan of this music, and I want to write stuff kind of like that or inspired by that because I have this feeling, this I have this like calling after I listen to it on my life, sort of thing. I don't think it is actually like a 180 of that when you're thinking about algorithmic influence, even though that tends to be more of a kind of a negative, you know what I'm saying? Like, I will say, like, I always try to just write what I want to write, and for sure I'm so glad you see that in this new album, because it's like 100% just like playground, just wrote what I wrote what I wanted to write. um, because it seems like at the end of the day, that's the type of stuff that actually maybe does do well sometimes with sync or whatever, if you're staying true to yourself. But at the same time, it's like maybe that's a reason why I have a handful of different monikers too, is like, okay, I'm inspired to write synth pop, but it's not going to be Elskavon or Blurstem. You know, it's so different that I'm just like started a new moniker with that, and that's just how it's kind of happened for me in that regard over the years. And I don't think I know it's not like algorithm chasing, but it's like influence from other artists or from other sounds. But yeah, but it's still a battle, you know, like I don't want to write stuff just for playlists or sync
exactly
possibility.
It's funny because a couple of years ago when I was first listening to, a couple of years ago, like 6 years ago, 8 years ago, when I was first listening to you as Elskavon and stuff, and then you announced Blurstem, and then there was Bora York, and then there was Glass Echoes and Olma, and I was sitting here like, oh my god, how does this guy write so much music? And it's all quality music too, you know what I mean? Like,
thanks.
I could never imagine myself in a million years being able to write that much music that gets put out. And it's awesome. It's very,
well, thanks.
I want to aspire to that, you know. So do you just sit in your studio all day and just write whatever you want and then just find a project for it?
Well, I'll start by saying I have issues. I have problems. So I think that's like, but yeah, I mean, it really, like, most of the projects have just happened naturally over the years. Like, I'll go way back. So I was in bands in high school, you know, and just like had different bands, putting stuff up on MySpace, playing a few shows here and there, and then the ambient music was, like I said, the first time I thought of a thing as like a quote side project. So that was my first like, ooh, and then I was doing like, all of a sudden I was like super inspired by like, I don't know, I was probably listening to a ton of like Iron and Wine and Damien Rice and like this like cinematic emotional folk thing. I was like, it's just like, it all stems from me being just a music fan. Like I've always just, like all of us, I just love music, and it like makes me and feel things, you know, and so like at that time, you know, and like that was like early Bon Iver, I was just like, oh, I need to write a folkish album now, like I just need to, it's just like part of me, you know. So then I wrote like kind of a folk album under my own name, and then I was probably listening to, a year or two later, I was gonna write a follow-up folk album, but then I was like listening like M83 and Washed Out and this like the whole chill wave movement thing, Neon Indian. I was just like, this is it. Like I need to write like, and at that time that was my first like dabbling in any synths, and it was mostly software synths. But like up to that point, I had mostly just done like guitar based stuff, you know. So it was like also from the production writing side, it was like this fresh, exciting thing of like synthesizers and like learning what you can do with all these different sounds, and probably the very first dabbling of like sampling. And I was just like, nope, this isn't gonna be a folk album, this is gonna be full on synth pop band. So that became Bora York, and then Bora York in my mind was my main thing for years, and that was like full on band thing, writing songs with my wife, who's a great singer. We were playing a lot of shows. So that was an exciting time. And then at that time I was still writing Elskavon, but again, it was still kind of a side project. So that's like, I go way back to give you, I guess, an idea of like, I've always kind of had different projects and monikers going, but then it's just like intensified since then of like, like, okay, I really want to write, well, let's take Blurstem, for example, which I guess I call the new Elskavon for me, where it's like Elskavon, this new album, like we talked about, has entered this new era of style, like electronic, vocal, whatever I want it to be. Blurstem has kind of taken up the ambient piano reins, if you will, just because I'm always gonna love writing that type of music, so I'm not gonna abandon it, So Blurstem is that, but that's also a little bit all over the board with some experimental electronic stuff. Anyways, Blurstem started because I was writing so much piano music. I had just like tuned up our old spinet piano in the family room down here at that time, and I had just felted it for the first time, and I was just like obsessed with writing piano music. But I was like, yes, I could put all this stuff out under Elskavon, but I didn't want Elskavon to just drown in piano music, as far as like the catalog. So I started Blurstem, and it's on and on. That's just kind of how it's worked. And so just naturally I'm just like, okay, started. So, but yeah, I don't know. At this point, I just write a lot of music, and like I said, I just have issues. So that kind of sums it up, probably.
It's working for you, Is that where Anthem Falls came from? Just because you needed a home for all the music, you wanted to maybe have a identity of a label, but without having to sign to a label, kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Keith Kenneth kind of thing.
Exactly. Actually, Keith was probably my main inspiration for that. Like where it's kind of like with Unseen for him. He's got his different projects, but Unseen is kind of like an umbrella, and that's what I kind of called Anthem Falls, and still I guess would call it that. Is like, yeah, it's a record label, kind of. And at this point, it's like naturally, slowly growing into more of a actual record label, where it's like I'm helping out mostly just friends on their releases that ask me, and I'm like, yeah, I love your music. Yeah. But yeah, it was birthed out of just being initially like kind of a record label, also kind of sync licensing, because I used to do a little bit more like direct client licensing. Yeah, kind of that, basically. But yeah, just like a home for all my different projects, basically.
For sure. Yeah, I'll keep saying it, like that was inspiring too, because everybody that I talk to wants to pull a Keith Kenneth and start like their own Unseen. But you did it. Nobody else actually does it. We all only talk about it. And so like it's inspiring to know that you can do that once again. Like it seems like you're doing exactly what you want to do, and it's great to see, like, oh man, because the amount of times that even I've said it too, right? Like, time to start a couple different aliases, and we'll start to really do this thing, and
Sure. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I guess I would just say it's like, I don't know, I wouldn't beat yourself up about like, oh, not having done other aliases either, because it's like, if it works and it feels natural and it feels right and it's exciting, then yeah, do it. But I don't think there's necessarily should be like a template. And I'm not saying you're saying that there is or anything like that. But from my perspective, looking at Alaskan Tapes, I'm like, man, you're just like killing it with that moniker. Like from, and just like with the quality of music you're doing and how successful you are with that moniker. Like there's part of me where I've wrestled over the years of like, and I've gotten, well, yeah, over the years I've just wrestled with like, man, am I spreading myself too thin, with these? And in a way, I think I have, in some ways, and there's definitely pros and cons to doing the multiple moniker umbrella thing and trying everything. And then there's pros and cons to like keeping everything super centralized and having one project that you really dig in. And, there's probably not a right or wrongness. It's just like what kind of works for you. I used to actually really wrestle with that, but the past couple of years I've kind of grown in that, like, and maybe it's just the older I get where I'm like, there's no point in like apologizing for doing what you want to do creatively. And that's where I'm at,
Yeah.
where I'm like, this is how I'm wired. Like, I just love writing tons of music and I just like get obsessed with a certain style. I just want to try it. I go for it. So I'm kind of like, why would I apologize for that? And not that I don't think anyone else even really cares. It's just me in my own head.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what are people going to think? Or like, so that's the other thing where it's like, I've realized like nobody else actually cares what I do music creatively. Like, I'm just going to do what I want to do. So, yeah, but
Yeah, it's a good realization to come to, and one that I came to as well, because I was kind of in your spot as well, where I still feel like I release too much music, because I look at people like Slow Meadow, where he can release 2 albums of perfect music and you know, continue his alias with putting out 1 track a year at this point.
yeah.
And it's still successful. And I look at that and I'm like, maybe that's the way to go. But then I also look at you, and then you're releasing all this stuff and you're very successful with it. And I go, maybe that's the way to go. You know, so you're always looking at these different
I know.
things. I think it's, you can't get away from it, unfortunately. But it's definitely something to at least be conscious of, right? Like,
For sure, yeah.
you're following your own path. You're your own artist. Take what you like from this artist, take what you like from that artist, and continue forward, you know? Kind of like you're saying with Sigaros and stuff, like the amount of times that I've tried to recreate songs on Rice Boy Sleeps is 1,000 times, you know? Like every time I listen to that album, I'm like, I want to make this song. And then I go try, I can't do it. And then, but something else comes from it, you know? And I guess that's just the way we all do it, even with the Bon Iver thing. Like, it doesn't sound like I'm inspired by Bon Iver, but that's all I listen to for months out of the year, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I always just try to come back to how am I wired? And then I would say, how are you wired, whoever, you know, like creatively? And then just like kind of like leaning into that. 'Cause some people are going to be wired more in like, okay, I'm going to put out an album or whatever, and it's going to be the only thing I put out, whether intentional or not. It's going to be the only thing I put out, this one project for this 2-year window or whatever, right? And I think that's an amazing thing if that's how you're wired and you are all in on it. And yeah, say you spend 70 hours on every track or something ridiculous. It's like,
Yeah.
I think in today's constant output world of music and culture we live in, because I know like some friends who have talked about that, and they like have this like, some of them have had this default like, I feel bad that I put like 60 hours into this mix and I'm like not releasing it. And I try to be like, on the flip side, like I'm so impressed and admire that you're that deep in it. And sure, I think there can be some pushback either way, because there is probably a threshold, a degree of like perfectionism and obsession that's maybe unhealthy. And at a certain point, if you want to build something in music, you do have to release stuff and finish stuff. You know, there is that, absolutely. But you know, I don't want people to default to thinking that's a bad thing either. That like, you care this much about your craft, that you are like this deep in it, and it's going to be that special to you, and hopefully to other people as well that hear it and are inspired by it. But so yeah, I don't know. Just embrace how you're wired, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, speaking about like a threshold, for me, like there is a specific amount of time that I can work on a track before overthinking it. And then it goes to garbage, you know? Like I find if I spend more than, I don't know the number, but if I spend too much time on a track, it'll never get done. I won't be happy with it. And it was a waste of time for me.
Like you go too far. Yeah.
Exactly. And when people ask me like, oh, what's your best advice or whatever for producers and composers and all this, I think like you almost just said, is work on finishing music. Even if you're not going to release it, just finish the track. True. You know, like especially in this, you know, industry that we're in now, with Spotify and all this, and how we have to come out with songs every 6 weeks and all this. It's like the best thing you can do is just get used to writing and finishing music, even if you're not happy with it. Because I don't know about you, but my most popular tracks are songs that I was not happy with, and I'm not happy with that even still.
Yeah, totally.
I want to get into Blurstem a little bit more, because the most recent stuff that you put out with Andrew Tasselmeyer is unbelievable. And I know that with Blurstem you've collaborated with the Hotel Neon guys and Andrew in particular quite a few times over the years, right?
With Hotel Neon, we just did a track together. But then Andrew was, my main contact when we were doing that. And then since then, the new stuff that you're talking about with Andrew. And then we've also just started writing a ton together, and all remotely so far. But yeah.
Nice. With the last single being Taper, I don't know how to pronounce it.
I don't know, so it's okay.
Is there more music coming? Yeah. Is there more music coming with Andrew?
Yeah, so that one, Duets, is out tomorrow, which 24th of March. Actually, that was kind of a unique one where it's like the album we actually put out with Fluid Radio, who I know you worked with in the past. So working with Dan was super fun because I've been a fan of Fluid Radio for a decade now, probably.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And just the work he does on those custom built CDs is just stunning. So it was so fun because Andrew had worked with him, and then he liked this album, put it out in October of last year. But then he, I don't know if it does it for every, but for this he was kind of like, you guys can do what you want, digital, I just would love to do the CD thing. So we're like, perfect, because we got to do the CDs, or have Dan do CDs, which is amazing. And then it was out on Bandcamp, on Fluid Radio in October, and then now we're putting it out digitally in March, and I'm just doing that through Anthem Falls. So it's kind of unique in that it was kind of out, but in this format, in this medium, and on Bandcamp. And then 6 months later, whatever it is, to release some singles in the more Spotify digital way we do it, and be able to do that, which I'm a little more versed in at this point. Pitches for Spotify and all that. And then, so to have the best of both worlds was really fun in that regard.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting way of putting it out, and actually something that I've thought about too. When I worked with Dan at Fluid Radio, I think we timed it so that the digital album and the physical came out at the same time. Maybe his came out, the physical came out maybe 2 weeks early. I can't remember at this point, but I would have to go back and look at that. But he's really great, and honestly, still, that CD that he made for it is one of my favorite things I've ever been a part of.
It was You Were Always in Ireland, right? Yeah.
And I think putting it out with him made that one of my favorite albums that I've made, simply for that reason. The CDs sell out, and then they're sold on Discogs for a high price, which feels good because you want to blame it on your music, but it's actually because of Dan.
Yeah, I know. He's got the built-in audience, and rightly so, because it's just such cool. Yeah, I don't think we set out to hey, can we do CDs first and then I think it would just happen where it's I think normally I would have oh yeah, well of course we'd put it out on streaming the same time or just after or whatever, but it just didn't we were just so, Andrew and I just didn't get around to it until later, and I was like, hey, we should put this out on streaming. Exactly. And then, hey, why not do a month and a half of a couple singles lead up just for fun, and it's where we're at with it. Andrew and I, it was we just want it to be a no burden, not a big deal. We don't want to pressure ourselves. We have to post on social media a bunch about it or do a bunch of promo. It's we already kind of did a bit of that. We did an interview through Dan. We got a couple blog posts for this back in October, and so now it's just kind of like real low key. Why not just put it? So that's been really fun and refreshing, and also like opened my mind up to like, I kind of want to do this more often, maybe if it's the right fit, Of course, we'd love to work more with Dan, but whether it's that or just like doing it on your own, Bandcamp or like a physical medium first, I don't know, and then streaming, I don't know. There's no rules, so
I feel like it's really cool, and it almost like it benefits the big fans. You know what I'm saying? Like the people that are always willing to buy on Bandcamp, they get it first.
Yeah.
And they get first opportunity to, get a record or get a CD or whatever. And the cool thing is that there's a lot of these boutique labels. I don't even want to call Fluid Radio a label, but I guess it is. Like the Hidden Vibes, like Endless Melancholy runs that and stuff. And they make these really amazing CDs. And like, that's so exciting to me.
To highlight that first. Or to have it be its own thing and not like, oh, we want you to go here to the Bandcamp, but also please stream on Spotify. It's like,
exactly.
Maybe this is a way to kind of do both. I don't know. Be able
exactly, because I'm sure you feel the same way. Majority of the people that hear your music is probably through Spotify, but they don't know who we are. Like,
right? That's
honest.
Not the like core fan base, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So
typically
that won't go away if you separate them. That's my thesis at least.
Yes, I like it.
I think it's a really cool idea.
We're on to something
speaking
here.
of, exactly, let's start it. Let's start something.
Here we go.
Speaking of your work with Hotel Neon and Andrew in general, though, like ever since Language of Loss, you guys make like really, really great music together, and I'm just hoping it goes into the future as well. I'm sure it will. But it's funny with Language of Loss in particular. Every time, so my dog is really bad in the car. So every time we're driving with him, the only song we can play is Language of Loss over and over, and he calms down.
Wow, that's so
and it was
cool.
a funny thing because that's how I kind of found it too. It came on like a radio or something, and I was like, "Man, who is this?" And I was like, "What? This is Chris in Hotel Neon?
Yeah.
Sick. Okay,
That's so fun.
And then with these 3 songs and the one that's coming out tomorrow, it kind of solidifies the fact that you guys are, work really, really well together. Which brings me to your project with Glass Echoes before we continue on with Blurstem, because there's a couple more things that I want to talk about with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But with Glass Echoes, that's a project between you and I can't remember his name.
Ben. Yeah.
Blanking.
Ben Noble.
You and Ben.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the sort of inspiration there to start another alias instead of doing like Elskavon and Ben Noble or Blurstem and Ben Noble,
Yep. We had that discussion. So Ben I met through a friend. He's from here in Minneapolis as well. Just met through a friend. We had coffee, hit it off years ago, and then I can't even remember if we like, okay, let's write songs together, or we just like hung out a few times in the studio, just here at his place, and just started writing, and it was just like, such a natural creative fit, and also just like we became good friends, and so we just like, we just started writing this album, and it just like was so creatively freeing because we each have our own things going on and own albums we're working on, and so this was just like its own thing. And we did talk about like, and we actually waited quite a bit till we had plenty of songs done, and we were like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a full album here. We didn't really have any like concrete plans as far as what it will be or should be or how many songs or whatever. It just like naturally we just kept writing ideas, and it was just like really organically happening. And then we discussed later on, like, okay, should it be Ben Noble and Chris Bartels? Should it be Ben Noble and Elskavon? And then we're just like, it's got to be its own thing because we work so well together. We're gonna keep writing, B, it just create like sonically, creatively. Again, it's just like goes back to the reason I start monikers is just like it just is its own thing. This feels like the thing to do, and so we just did. Became Glass Echoes, and we're still trucking. We got the one album out, but we have a lot of songs already done for. Actually, I was just at his place yesterday for the day, and we
nice.
knocked out a bunch of ideas, and man, something special about being in a room together writing with people, because I do a lot of remote collaborating as well, but which is awesome as well. But yeah,
it must really feel great, because like I noticed that you guys, you put out Breathe, and then it's like you didn't stop with the singles. You're going into album 2 already, and it's so cool to see. Like, I've never had an opportunity to really collaborate with people in person. I have a little bit, but it's the reason I don't collaborate with people often is because I hate remote collaborations, because I personally always drop the ball. You know,
sure.
If we're not in this project together for a while, I just forget about it and never get to it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it feels horrible, and like it seems like you're really good at it though. Yeah, Glass Echoes, man. That's a sick one, a sick project. Really,
Thanks,
really great.
man. Well, come to Minneapolis, and we'll do a bunch of in-person collaborating anytime. Or I'll come up here.
I'm hoping that's sort of we're coming up to Toronto.
Or both.
I'm hoping that's sort of the next steps for me, like, you know, traveling for the purpose of collaborating. So, going back to Blurstem real quick. I feel like it started off as only solo piano.
Correct, yeah.
And then you kind of got into more of the compositional ambient drone type stuff, and sort of incorporated it into Blurstem. Was that because you were sort of losing that identity of the ambient identity in Elskavon, or was it just felt like the right place to put the ambient music?
Yeah, I think it was before I started expanding the sound of Blurstem before I decided, okay, Elskavon's going to be a totally kind of new thing style-wise. So, yeah, I guess it would probably... Well, let me look at my, like, discography, because I'm, like... Yeah, I do remember, like, I've had a couple just EPs of Blurstem solo piano, and then... Oh, yeah, okay, so Among the Oaks first... So I did a couple just piano EPs, and that's, like I said, when I was just, like, excited about the piano, writing a ton on piano. And that's what kind of, like, birthed Blurstem. And then after that, it was my album Among the Oaks, and that was, I would say, I had collaborated before and, like, featured artists and featured on other artists' albums a little bit here and there with various projects. But I would say Among the Oaks, my Blurstem first full-length album, was the first time I was like, I'm going to write an album and try to make it as collaborative as I possibly can, you know? So there's a couple friends from Minneapolis on there where we did some in person, but most of them are just remote collaborations. I asked you to be on it. You didn't. You dropped the ball on. I'm just kidding.
I did. I'm sure I said yes, and then I wasn't on it. You know, not because I didn't want to be, but because, you know, other stuff comes up. I know. This is a perfect example.
I'm just kidding. A case in point. No, but that I think that was where it's like, I don't remember when I decided, okay, this is going to be highly collaborative, but it just happened, and it was so fun, so exciting for me to, like, bring on board other artists. Some artists who were kind of just, like, getting going with their thing, and then some who were more established who I really admire and look up to, like Lowercase Noises and Hotel Neon is not on that album because it stylistically didn't fit. It felt like it wanted to be its own single. Language is Lost. But that was still in that era of intent of, like, collaborating a bunch. So I think that's where that Blurstem just naturally evolved from, like, because the stuff where it's not featuring on the album is still, I think, mostly just solo piano. So it's just me on piano.
I see. Yeah.
But then the collaboration brought in, like Alex, my friend Alex, is just like an amazing strings player. He plays violin, viola, cello. So he added these like layers on Bellingham, the first track, for example.
Yeah.
And then others added, like Andy with Lowercase Noises, guitar maestro, ambient guitar legend. Like he added his thing, and that was like sweet. Like this is just like naturally expanded sound, sonically style. And then I think from there it just kind of let me do whatever. But maybe, who knows? Like I don't know if I thought about it this way, but maybe that's, having done that with Blurstem is what kind of like catapulted me to slowly but surely make Elskavon a totally different thing. Because otherwise maybe they would diverge in styles too much in my own head. I don't know. And again, I'm probably just overthinking things. Like there's no rules. But that's where it kind of started, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it kind of just opened the floodgates for you to be able to experiment with,
I think so,
ambient and more soundscapey type stuff.
I think so. Yeah.
I'm going through the discography of Blurstem right now, and I'm like, oh my god, you've done like really great music that I kind of not forgot about, but I haven't heard in a while. Like all your stuff with Bric-a-Brac, right?
Yeah, Derek
is unbelievable stuff. It's so
thank you.
Just like unique, you know what I'm saying?
Thanks. Yeah, Derek is he's such a good dude, and I love working with him. Yeah, a lot of collaborations. Yeah, I think with Blurstem, kind of like I don't know if I would say is my most but as far as like a project that is a project of mine, whereas like take Glass Echoes is like still a duo, essentially, me and Ben. But Blurstem is still like a project of mine. But I would say the most heavily collaborative. And it goes back to that first album. I was like, this is so fun to just write with people. And then ever since then, a lot of Blurstem stuff is like, with Andrew or with Derek, Bric-a-Brac. So I think that's the reason that I've expanded the style and also released quite a bit. My buddy Elijah in Cleveland, Elijah Bisbee, we put out a full length. So it's just been
amazing, man. It's been, Blurstem in particular has been so fun to watch grow because, it's one of the artists that one of the projects that I noticed right when you started putting out EPs for it, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, oh, another project by Elskavon. And then you get to watch it grow and morph into all this stuff. And it's really exciting as a fan.
Thanks, man.
To watch, especially because it's still going and you're still blowing my mind, like with these Andrew's tracks, the tracks with Andrew. I'm like, oh my god, I heard Ray and I was like, what the hell? How did you guys make that? You know what I'm saying? It's so good. Man.
That means a lot.
Such a great song.
That one, the one with Andrew, with the duets, is the name of the new album where that Ray is on. Yeah, that was the first one Andrew and I did, and we just passed stuff back and forth. But it did start with just piano that I sent, ideas that I sent to Andrew, and then he's added layers, and then I ended up mixing that one out on my back patio table one like summer afternoon. So it's got this like, I don't know, maybe I'm too romantic about things, but I feel like that added to this like kind of organic, like natural feel to it. It's just like doing something like that, getting out of my studio space and doing something different like that. But
yes, something about it does sound different. Like ever since I heard it, and I think I messaged you about it too when I first heard it.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's just been stuck in my head. Maybe not like a pop song would be, but just like, I'm like, okay, go back and listen to Ray.
Oh man.
And be inspired again, which comes back. And I, do and don't believe in the sort of changing your, the atmosphere in which you mix tracks or record tracks, because I want to do that a lot as well, like recording stuff outside instead of inside, or mixing outside instead of inside. And then it gets in your head and you're like, oh, this did well because of that, or this didn't do well because of that,
Sure.
It's kind of, it's funny how superstitious we all are.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's cool when you've done a couple like videos, just kind of like jams outdoors, right? Do those become
Exactly.
releases of do those come releases of yours, or are they just kind of like they are what
No.
they're just jams? Yeah.
Yeah, they're just jams. Like especially the one that you're probably thinking of.
That's cool.
I had just gotten into loopers, so I was learning them,
Sure.
and then I was like, let's just do this. Film it, which is always fun. And then you don't have any pressure of putting it out, and like it can just be its own thing.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of the time the way I like to do things. But
Cool.
before we end this, I want to talk a little bit about labels. And, since you have Anthem Falls, but then you also release with Western Vinyl and, what is it? Tigo and Bugatti.
Bigo and Twiggetti.
Oh, Bigo and Twiggetti.
I know.
Yeah.
Tough one.
Got it backwards. And stuff like this. When do you decide that a release should be on a label versus self-released?
That's a great question. I mean, for years and years, I did everything just independent. Anthem Falls. Not because I had any sort of like it must be a certain way or not. I had a mindset of just like DIY. I don't know if I was like down on myself, but I probably was like, well, what label is gonna work with me yet? So that's probably the like overall.
Yeah.
I didn't really pursue it, is what I'm trying to say. And I also liked learning the aspects of everything, even just like distribution via DistroKid, something that's like fairly simple, but just like it's still like when you first get going, it's all intimidating, so like learning artwork, everything. And then man, I can't even remember the first like off the top of my head who was the first like label that I worked with, I guess, because nowadays it's like label, it's kind of like a blend, I think, between like label and distributor, and each label that I've worked with has different strengths. I don't remember your original question. I'm just going trailing off in the ether here, but yeah, what was your question?
It was mostly, when do you know an album or a track or whatever should be released under a label versus when you do it?
Right. I don't think.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I think it's just like, I think like connecting with certain people and like Kyle McAvoy at Sounder House, like just like connecting with him. I think I just hit him up. I mean, I'm talking years ago when he was just had a playlist, his first playlist with like, I don't know, 40 followers. This was like 2017 era, whereas like it was kind of before, now everybody knows about playlists. Everybody's hitting up people for playlists. Can you add me to your playlist and things like that? Back then, like it was new. Like it was kind of like this, like underground. Like it wasn't common knowledge
It was a
like
secret.
it is now. Well, kind of. I just don't think we thought about it that much. I certainly didn't. And then when I first did, I was like, okay, this is interesting. Messaging people to put them on my ears, whatever. So, like, connect with Kyle, and then like, because like Sounder House is a label, but it still feels like somewhat independent releases where I'm, and I just mean that in the sense like his strength is like pitching and playlisting and streaming side of things. Bigo, I don't even remember how I got hooked up with them, but Jim Perkins runs Bigo and Twiggetti, and just love working with them on Blurstem stuff, especially. They're just like, it's like easy, quick as far as like getting things moved along and done, and they just like down to earth, like get things and pitch, and they have a network. So it feels still like kind of the things I like about a DIY independent release. But also they have, they bring their contacts and their strengths and their pluses to it. And then Western Vinyl was like, I actually had been a fan of Western Vinyl because I knew of them, I think probably through Keith and Goldmund first. And I don't know why. It was maybe I never really thought to like reach out to Western vinyl. And it's probably like that. Like, well, I don't know if I'm, I don't know, established enough or whatever. I don't know. Until John Hayes and I wrote Du Nord together, and he was like, let's hit up some labels, and I was like, sweet, yeah, let's do it, and then we hit up Western Vinyl, and Brian dug it and put it out, and I was like, this is awesome, because this is also I would say Western Vinyl is the most, for lack of better term, like traditional in this label I've worked with, in the sense of like PR campaign, physical, along with digital and pitching and all that. To sum up, I just like, sometimes I'll consider beforehand, okay, do I want to write, or do I want to, this album I'm working on, do I want to send this over to Bigo, or do I want to send this, or do I just want to release on my own? I think I just like trying things, and so I'll send stuff around, and sometimes things work, and other times I just put it out on my own, and it's just kind of all over the board. And certain things are now like, okay, this moniker, like for example, Blurstem, I release a lot with Bigo now because it's just a great fit, Elskavon, for example, is like on Western Vinyl, and that's a great fit, and then there's this other projects where sometimes I release with an album or with a label, other times I just put it out on my own. So I don't know. That's a terrible answer to your question. It's just all over the board. Just kind of like my moniker is just sporadic, all over the place, trying things.
No, it sounds like you sort of just know when the project is right for a certain label, and when it's not, and when you want to release it yourself. But you brought up Du Nord, and that album with John Hayes is so amazing. Like, I'm hoping that there's more work with John Hayes in the future as well.
We got LP2 slowly but surely in the works. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I went to Colorado because he moved to Denver a year or two ago. And then I went out there last May or something like that, and we started writing another album. So slow going, but very exciting.
Sweet. Yeah. Well, dude, I just want to thank you for being on this. Like, thanks for listening to another episode of We All Speak in Poems. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd appreciate a quick like and favorite on whatever platform you're using, but also for you to check out Chris Bartels' music, any of his side projects, really. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and see you then.